In 1994, something changed in American law that most people never noticed. The Uniform Commercial Code, the legal framework that governs commercial transactions in all 50 states, was revised. Artículo 8, which deals with investment securities, was read, and in that revision, a new concept was introduced. Security entitlement. Before 1994, if you bought a stock, you owned it. You had a property right. The stock certificate, even if held electronically, represented actual ownership. If your broker went bankrupt, your stocks were segregated, protected, yours. You could reclaim them. After 1994, that changed.
You have a security entitlement,
Now,
which is a contractual
you don't own your
claim to a
stocks.
share of a
You have
pool
a
of
security
assets held by an
entitlement,
intermediary.
which is a contractual
The
claim to a
intermediary,
share of a
your
pool of
broker or the
assets held by an
clearinghouse above them,
intermediary.
owns
The
the actual
intermediary,
securities.
your
You
broker
have a
or the
claim.
clearinghouse above
And in
them,
bankruptcy,
owns the
claims rank
actual
below
securities.
secured creditors.
You
This
have
isn't
a claim.
conspiracy theory.
And in
This is
bankruptcy,
written into the
claims rank
UCC
below
in every
secured
state.
creditors.
It's been
This
tested
isn't
in bankruptcy
conspiracy
court,
theory.
and the
This is
results
written
are
into the
clear.
UCC in every
When a
state.
broker fails, secured
It's been
creditors
tested in
take the
bankruptcy
assets.
court, and the
Customers
results
with security
are
entitlements
clear.
get
When
whatever
a broker
is left,
fails,
which is
secured
often
creditors
pennies on
take
the
the
dollar,
assets.
and they wait years to
Customers
get it.
with security
This system
entitlements
was
get
put in
whatever's
place
left,
deliberately,
which is often
designed over
pennies on the
decades by
dollar,
central
and they wait
bankers,
years to
clearing
get it.
corporations,
This
and Wall
system
Street
was put in
insiders.
place
The architecture for
deliberately,
what David
designed
Rogers
over
Webb,
decades
a
by
former
central
hedge fund
bankers,
manager, calls the
clearing
great taking.
corporations,
Webb's
and
book
Wall
and
Street
documentary,
insiders.
released in
The architecture
2023,
for what
lay out
David
the
Rogers
legal
Webb,
framework,
a
the
former
historical
hedge fund
precedents,
manager,
and the
calls the
endgame.
great taking.
In the
Webb's
next
book and
financial
documentary,
crisis, when
released in
derivatives blow up and
2023,
the system
lay out the
collapses,
legal framework,
trillions of dollars in
the historical
stocks, bonds, and
precedents,
securities
and the
will be
endgame. In the
confiscated,
next financial
not
crisis,
stolen.
when derivatives
Confiscated
blow
legally.
up and the
Because
system
the law
collapses,
says banks are
trillions of
secured
dollars in
creditors,
stocks,
and you are
bonds, and
This is
securities
the
will be
story
confiscated.
of how they did it. How they dematerialized
Not
ownership,
stolen,
introduced
confiscated.
security entitlements, harmonized
Legally,
the rules globally,
because the
and
law
built the
says
legal
banks are
certainty that allows
secured
them to take
creditors,
everything.
and you are
How
not.
Lehman Brothers in 2008
This is the story of how they
and
did
MF
it,
Global
how
in
they
2011
dematerialized
were test
ownership,
runs,
introduced
and why
security
the next
entitlements,
crisis will be
harmonized the
great
rules
taking.
globally, and
Because
built the
when
legal
$600
certainty that
trillion
allows them to
derivatives
take
collapse,
everything. How Lehman
collateral
Brothers in
backing those bets
2008
is
and
your
MF
stocks,
Global in
and
2011
the
were
law
at test
says
runs,
they can
and
take
why
it.
the next crisis
Before
will
we
be the
talk
great
about what
taking,
changed,
because when
you need to
$600 trillion
understand what you
in
think
derivatives
you own when you
collapse,
buy a stock.
the collateral backing
Most
those
people
bets is
believe
your
they own the
stocks,
stock.
and the law
If
says
you buy 100
they
shares
can
of
take
Apple
it.
through your
Before
brokerage
we
account,
talk about what
you think
changed,
you own 100
you need to
shares of
understand
Apple.
what you think you
That's what the
own when you
account
buy a
statement
stock.
says.
Most
That's what your
people
broker
believe
tells
they
you.
own the
But
stock.
legally,
If you
you
buy
don't.
100 shares of
Here's
Apple
how the
through your
system
brokerage
actually
account,
works.
you think you own
When
100
you buy a
shares of
stock,
Apple?
your broker doesn't
That's
go
what the
out and buy
account
a
statement
physical
says.
stock
That's
certificate
what
with
your
name
broker
on it.
tells you. But
Instead,
legally,
the broker
you
routes your
don't.
order through a clearinghouse.
Here's how the system
which
actually
settles the
works.
trade
When
through
you
an
buy a
entity
stock,
called the
your broker
Depository
doesn't go
Trust
out and buy a
Clearing
physical
Corporation,
stock
or
certificate with your name on it.
DTCC.
Instead,
DTCC,
the broker routes
through
your
its
order
nominee,
through a
Cede Co,
clearinghouse,
is the
which
registered
settles the
owner
trade
of
through an entity
virtually
called
every
the
publicly
Depository
traded
Trust
security
and Clearing
in the United
Corporation,
States.
or
Not
DTCC.
you, not your broker.
The DTCC,
Cede Co,
through its nominee
your
Cede
broker's
Co,
account at the DTCC
is the registered
shows
owner of
that the
virtually
broker
every
holds a certain
publicly
number of
traded
shares,
security in the
and your
United
account at the
States,
broker
not you.
shows that you have a claim to a certain
Not your
number of
broker.
shares.
Cede
But nowhere
Co.
in this chain
Your
do
broker's
you own
account at the
actual
DTCC
shares.
shows that the broker
What you
holds a
have
certain number
under
of
the current
shares,
UCC
and your
Article
account
8
at the broker
is a
shows that you have a
security
claim to a
entitlement.
certain number of shares,
UCC
but nowhere in
defines
this
this
chain
as
do
a
you own
package
the
of rights
actual
that an
shares.
entitlement
What you
holder
have
has
under the
against
current
the
UCC
securities
Article 8
intermediary.
is a security
Not ownership.
entitlement. The UCC
Contractual
defines this
claim.
as a package of
And
rights that
here's
an
where it gets
entitlement
worse.
holder has against the
All
securities
securities are held in
intermediary,
unsegregated pools.
not ownership.
Your shares,
A contractual
and everyone else's
claim.
shares
And here's where
are
it gets
commingled.
worse.
They're fungible.
All securities are
meaning
held in
interchangeable.
unsegregated pools.
You can't point
Your
to specific
shares
shares
and everyone
say those
else's
are mine.
shares are commingled.
You have a pro
They're
rata claim
fungible,
to a pool.
meaning
And if the
interchangeable.
intermediary
You
goes
can't point to
bankrupt,
specific
you don't get
shares
your
and say
specific
those are
shares
mine.
back.
You have a
You
pro
get a
rata
pro rata
claim
share
to a
of whatever
pool,
is
and
left
if the
after
intermediary
secured
goes
creditors are
bankrupt,
paid.
you don't get
The
your
term for
specific
this
shares
is
back. You
revindication.
get a pro rata share
And
of
the
whatever is
UCC
left after
explicitly
secured
prohibits it.
creditors are paid.
You cannot revindicate
The term for
or
this
reclaim
is
your
and the
specific
UCC
securities in a
explicitly prohibits
bankruptcy.
it. You
You're an
cannot
unsecured creditor with a
revindicate
contractual claim.
or reclaim
That's it.
your
This
specific
wasn't always
securities.
the case.
In a
Before the
bankruptcy,
UCC
you're an
revisions in
unsecured creditor with a
1997,
contractual
You
claim.
had property rights.
That's it.
Stocks were
This wasn't
considered
always the
property,
case.
even if
Before
held
the UCC
electronically.
revisions in
They
the
were segregated
1990s, securities,
and
you had
identifiable.
property rights.
If your broker
Stocks
failed,
were
you had a
considered
superior
property,
claim
even if
to your
held
own
electronically.
security.
They were
that
segregated
was
and
changed.
identifiable. If your
Deliberately.
broker failed, you had a
Let me show you
superior
how.
claim to your own
The
securities,
process
but
of
that was
eliminating your
changed.
property rights to securities happened in
Deliberately.
stages over decades.
Let me show you
Stage
how.
one
The
was
process of
dematerialization.
eliminating your property rights
In
to
the
securities happened in
1,960
stages over
seconds,
decades.
Wall Street faced a
Stage
paperwork
1
crisis.
was in the
Trading volume
1960s.
exploded.
Wall Street faced a
Physical stock
paperwork
certificates,
crisis.
which had to be
Trading
delivered and
volume
recorded,
exploded.
overwhelmed the system.
Physical stock
The New York
certificates,
Stock Exchange
which had to be
even
delivered
closed
and
some days
recorded,
because they couldn't
overwhelmed.
keep up.
This
So
is the
Banking
New
and
York Stock
Securities
Exchange
Industry
even
Committee,
closed some
BASIC,
days
was formed to
because
find
they
a
couldn't
solution.
keep up. So
Their
the Banking
solution
and
was to
Securities
eliminate
Industry
physical
Committee,
certificates,
BASIC,
dematerialized.
was formed to find a
Stocks would be
solution. Their
electronic
solution was
entries
to
in a
eliminate
centralized
physical
ledger,
certificates.
more efficient,
Dematerialized
faster
stocks would be
settlement,
electronic
and it
entries in a
solved the
centralized
paperwork
ledger.
crisis.
More
But it also did
efficient,
something else.
faster settlement.
It severed the direct
And it
link
solved the
between
paperwork
the investor
crisis.
and the
But it
stock.
also did something
Before
else.
dematerialization,
It
if you
severed
owned
the
stock,
direct link
you had a
between the
certificate,
investor and the
physical
stock.
evidence of
Before
ownership.
dematerialization,
After
if you owned stock,
you had an account
you had a
entry,
certificate,
a claim.
physical evidence
Stage 2
of
was
ownership.
centralization.
After
In 1973,
dematerialization,
the
you had an
Depository
account
Trust
entry.
Company, DTC, was
A
created
claim.
to hold
Stage
all
2
dematerialized
was
securities
centralization.
in a central
In
depository.
1973,
The
the Depository Trust
introduced a
Company,
nominee,
DTC,
Cede
was
Co,
created to hold all
which became the
dematerialized
registered owner of
securities
all
in a central
securities.
depository. The
Brokers held
DTC
accounts
introduced
at
a
the
nominee, Cede
Investors held
Co,
accounts
which
at
became the
brokers,
registered
and
owner of
Cede
all
Co
securities.
held
Brokers held
everything.
accounts at the
This
DTC.
centralization was sold as
Investors
efficiency.
held accounts at
One
brokers,
clearinghouse to
and
settle
Cede
all
Co
trades. No more moving
held
paper.
everything.
Instant settlement. But centralization,
This centralization was sold as
consolidation
efficiency.
of ownership.
One clearinghouse
Cede Co
to
became
settle
the
all
legal
trades.
owner. You became a beneficial
No more
owner
moving paper.
with only a
Instant settlement.
claim. Stage 3 was the UCC
But centralization
revision.
also meant consolidation
Starting in
of ownership.
1994, Article
Cede
8
Co
and Article 9
became
of
the legal
Uniform
owner.
Commercial
You
Code
became a
were
beneficial
rewritten.
owner with
These
only a
revisions
claim.
introduced the concept
Stage
of
3
security
was the
entitlement
UCC
and redefined
revisions.
the rights of
Starting in
entitlement
1994,
The changes
Article
were
8
drafted by
and
a
Article
working
9
group
of the
that
Uniform
included
Commercial
representatives
Code
from the
were
Federal Reserve,
These revisions
the
introduced the
DTCC,
concept of
major
security
banks,
entitlement and
securities
redefined
firms,
the rights of
not
entitlement
consumer
holders.
advocates,
The changes were
not
drafted
investor
by a
protection
working
groups.
group that included
The insiders who
representatives
benefit
from the
from the
Federal
system.
Reserve, the
The revised
DTCC,
UCC was then
major
adopted
banks,
by all 50
and
states,
securities firms,
one by one, over a
not
period of
consumer
years.
advocates,
No federal legislation,
not investor
no
protection
congressional
groups. The
Just state
insiders who benefit
legislatures
from the
passing
system.
model laws
The revised
written by banking
UCC was then
industry
adopted
lawyers.
by all 50
And by
states,
2001,
one by one,
the new
over a
UCC
period
was
of
in
years.
effect everywhere. Your property rights were gone.
No federal
Stage 4 was
legislation,
harmonization.
no
The
congressional
same legal
debate,
structure was
just
implemented
state
globally.
legislatures passing
UK,
model laws
the EU,
written by banking
Japan,
industry
Canada.
lawyers, and by
All
2001,
harmonized their
the new
securities laws
UCC
with
was
the
in effect
UCC model.
everywhere.
Security
Your property
entitlements,
rights were gone.
central
Stage
depositories,
4 was
no
harmonization.
reivindication.
The same
The
legal
global
structure was
coordination
implemented
led by
globally.
groups like the Group of
The
30,
UK,
G30,
the EU,
a private
Japan,
organization of central
Canada,
bankers
all
and financial
harmonized their
leaders.
securities laws
They
with the
published
UCC
papers
model.
advocating
Security
for harmonized
entitlements,
rules. And
central
over 2
depositories,
decades, the rules
no
were harmonized.
reivindication.
Now, whether you own
The
stocks
global
in New York,
coordination
London,
was led by
Tokyo, or
groups
Frankfurt,
like the Group of
the legal
30,
structure is
Hey
the same.
20, a
Cede
private
Co,
organization of central
or
bankers and
its
financial
equivalent,
leaders.
owns
They
the
published
securities.
papers
You have a
advocating for
security
harmonized
entitlement,
rules.
and in bankruptcy,
And over 2
secured
decades,
creditors come first.
the rules were harmonized.
Stage 5
Now,
was safe
whether you
harbor.
own stocks in New
In
York,
2005,
London,
the US
Tokyo,
Bankruptcy Code
or
was
Frankfurt,
amended to give
the legal
derivatives
structure is the
contracts
same.
super
Cede
priority
Co,
in bankruptcy.
or its equivalent,
Under the
owns the
Bankruptcy
securities.
Abuse Prevention and
You
Consumer
have a security
Protection Act,
entitlement, and in bankruptcy,
BACCPA,
secured
derivatives
creditors come
counterparties
first.
can seize
Stage
collateral
5 was
immediately,
safe harbor.
without
In
judicial
2005,
review, without
the
waiting
U.S.
for the bankruptcy
Bankruptcy Code
process.
was amended to give
They
derivatives
are the
contracts
protected class.
super priority in
And what is that
bankruptcy.
collateral?
Under the Bankruptcy Abuse
Securities.
Prevention and Consumer
Your
Protection
securities,
Act,
held in
BAP,
unsegregated
CPA,
pools at the
derivatives
DTCC.
counterparties can
If a
seize
major
collateral
derivatives
immediately,
counterparty fails,
without judicial
or if the
review,
DTCC
without
itself
waiting
faces
for the bankruptcy
insolvency,
process.
derivatives
They
holders
are
can
the
sweep
protected
in,
class.
seize the collateral,
And what is
leave
that
everyone
collateral?
else with nothing.
Securities.
This is not theoretical. This
Your
is written into the
securities,
bankruptcy
held in
code.
unsegregated pools
Section
at the DTCC.
555,
If a major derivatives
556,
counterparty fails,
559,
or if the
and
DTCC itself faces
561,
insolvency,
create the
derivatives
safe harbor.
holders can sweep in,
Derivatives come first.
seize the collateral,
Security
and
entitlement
leave
holders
everyone else
come
with
last.
nothing. This
And
is
the final
not
stage
theoretical.
is central clearing.
This
After
is
the
written into the
2008
Bankruptcy
crisis,
Code,
regulators
Section
mandated that most derivatives be
555,
cleared through central clearinghouses,
556,
or CCPs.
559,
The idea
and
was to
561
reduce
create the
counterparty
safe
risk.
harbor. Derivatives
Instead
come
of bilateral
first.
trades between banks,
Security entitlement
derivatives
holders
would
come
flow through a
last. interest, and the final stage is central clearing. After the 2008 crisis, regulators mandated that most derivatives be cleared through central clearinghouses, or CCPs. The idea was to reduce counterparty risk. Instead of bilateral trades between banks, derivatives would flow through a CCP, which would stand in the middle and guarantee performance.
If the
This is
derivatives
good.
market blows up,
But here's the problem. The
DTCC goes
CCPs
insolvent.
are
And when it
undercapitalized.
does,
The
secured
DTCC,
creditors take the
which
collateral.
clears
The
derivatives,
securities held
holds
by
only
Cede Co,
$3.5
your
billion
stocks, your
in
bonds,
capital.
all of it.
Against a derivatives
The legal
market with a
framework is in
notional
place.
value
The great
exceeding
taking is set up.
$600 trillion.
All it needs
If the
is a
derivatives
trigger.
market blows up,
Now, let
the
me show you the
DTCC goes
precedents
insolvent.
because this has
And when it
already
does,
happened
secured
twice.
creditors
In
take the
2008,
collateral.
Lehman
The
Brothers
securities
filed for
held by
bankruptcy.
Cede Co,
It was the fourth largest
your
investment bank
stocks,
in the U.S.
your bonds, all of it.
$639 billion in assets, over 900,000 derivative contracts. And when it failed, customers found out they didn't
The
own
legal
their
framework
assets.
is in place. The
Lehman's
great taking
broker-dealer,
is set up.
Lehman Brothers Incorporated,
All it needs is a
LBI,
trigger. Now
held
let me show you the
customer
precedents
accounts.
because this
Most
has
retail
already
customers got their
happened
assets transferred quickly
twice.
to other brokers through the
In
Securities
2008,
Investor Protection
Lehman
Act,
Brothers filed for
SIPC
bankruptcy.
process.
It was the fourth
But
largest
institutional
investment bank in
customers,
the U.S.
especially those using Lehman as a prime
$639
broker,
billion
faced delays
in
and
assets,
losses.
over
Prime brokerage
900,000
customers,
derivative
mostly hedge
contracts.
funds,
And when it
had
failed,
assets held at
customers
Lehman.
found out they didn't
Those
own their
assets were
assets.
rehypothecated,
Lehman's
meaning
broker-dealer,
Lehman borrowed against
Lehman
them,
Brothers
pledged
Inc.,
them as collateral
LBI,
for its own borrowing.
held customer
When Lehman
accounts.
failed,
Most
the
retail
assets were tied
customers
up in
got their
bankruptcy.
assets transferred
Some
quickly
hedge
to
funds
other
couldn't locate
brokers
their
through the
collateral.
Securities
It
Investor
had been lent
Protection
out
Act,
to others or used by
SIPC,
Lehman to secure its own debts.
process.
recovery
But
took
institutional
years.
customers,
Lehman's
especially
UK
those
entity,
using Lehman
Lehman
as a
Brothers
prime
International
broker,
Europe,
faced
LBIE,
delays and
was even
losses.
worse.
Prime brokerage
Customers tried to
customers,
move their
mostly
accounts
hedge
when
funds,
LBIE entered
had assets
administration.
held at
They
Lehman.
couldn't.
Those
The
assets were
frozen.
rehypothecated, meaning
Rehypothecated,
Lehman borrowed against them,
commingled, gone.
pledged them as collateral
Some
for its
eventually
own
recovered a
borrowing.
portion,
When Lehman
but
failed,
many lost
the assets
huge
were
amounts.
tied up in
And the
bankruptcy.
process took a decade.
Some hedge funds couldn't
Lehman's
locate their
bankruptcy
collateral.
lasted
It had
until
been lent out to
2022.
others or
14
used by
years.
Lehman to secure its
Creditors
own
got
debts.
back
And recovery
$115
took years.
billion out of
Lehman's UK
$639
entity,
billion.
Lehman Brothers,
Customers who had
International
unsecured
Europe,
claims got pennies on the
LBIE,
dollar. The lesson?
was even worse.
Security
Customers
entitlements
tried to move
don't
their
protect
accounts
you.
when
In
LBIE entered
bankruptcy,
administration.
you're last in
They
line.
couldn't.
The second precedent is
The
MF
assets were
Global.
frozen,
In 2011,
rehypothecated,
MF Global, a commodities
commingled,
broker, made massive
gone.
bets on
Some
European
eventually
sovereign debt.
recovered a
The
portion,
bets
but
went
many
bad.
lost huge
The firm
amounts.
faced margin calls and couldn't meet them.
And the process
It
took a
filed for
decade.
bankruptcy
Lehman's
on the 31st
bankruptcy
of
lasted
October
until 2022.
MF
14
Global held
years.
$6
Creditors
billion
got back
customer accounts.
$115 billion
Commodities
out
accounts,
of
which by law
$639
must be
billion.
segregated.
Customers who had
Segregated
unsecured
means separated
claims
from the
got pennies
firm's
on
own
the
funds.
dollar.
Untouchable.
The
Protected.
lesson, security
When MF Global
entitlements
failed,
don't protect you.
$1.6
In
billion in customer
bankruptcy,
funds was
you're
missing.
last in line.
Gone.
The second precedent
Intermingled with the
is
firm's
MF
own
Global.
funds
In
and used to meet
2011,
margin calls.
MF Global,
This was a
a
clear
commodities
violation of
broker,
regulations.
made massive
And yet,
bets on
it
European
happened.
sovereign debt.
Customers filed
The bets
claims.
went bad.
The
The firm
bankruptcy
faced
process
margin
started,
calls and couldn't
and it
meet
took
them.
years
It
to
filed for
recover funds.
bankruptcy on October
Most got
31st,
back 80 to
2011.
90 cents on the dollar, but some got
MF
less,
Global held
and the
$6 billion
trust was
in
shattered.
customer accounts,
Because of
commodities
segregated
accounts,
the
which
gold
by
standard
law
of customer
must be
protection
segregated.
can be rated
Segregated
and commingled
means
in
separated
prices,
from the firm's
and
own
nothing is
funds.
safe. MF
Untouchable.
Global's CEO was John
Protected.
Corzine, former governor
But
of
when
New
MF
Jersey,
Global
and
failed,
former CEO of
$1.6
Goldman
billion
Sachs.
in
He was
customer
never
funds was
criminally
missing.
charged. The firm
Got
paid fines,
intermingled
and
with the firm's
precedent
own
was set.
funds and used
In
to
a
meet
crisis,
margin calls.
Customer funds can and will be used to save
This
the
was a
firm
clear
or
violation
pay
of
secured
regulations,
creditors.
and yet it happened.
Lehman and MF Global
Customers
were trust
filed
funds.
claims. The
Proof of
bankruptcy
concept.
process
The legal
started,
structure works.
and it took years to
In
recover
bankruptcy,
funds.
secured
Most got back
creditors
80
take
to
the
90
assets.
cents on the dollar.
Customers with security
But
entitlements
some
wait
got
in line.
less, and the trust
And
was
the system
shattered.
moves on.
Because of segregated
Now
accounts,
imagine the same
the
scenario,
gold
but
standard of
scaled
customer
up.
protection
Not one broker
can be
failing,
rated and
but a
commingled in a
systemic
crisis. Then nothing is
Derivatives,
safe.
unwinding.
MF Global's
The DTCC
CEO was
insolvent.
John Corzine,
That's the
former
great
governor of
taking.
New Jersey and former
it's not a
CEO
matter
of
of
Goldman
if.
Sachs.
It's when.
He was never criminally
Let me show
charged.
you the derivatives
The firm
problem,
paid fines,
because this is what will trigger the
and the
great
precedent
taking.
was set. In a
The global
crisis,
derivatives
customer
market has a
funds can
notional
and will be
value
used to
exceeding
save the firm
$600
or pay
trillion.
secured creditors.
Some estimates go as high
Lehman
as $1
and MF Global were
quadrillion.
test runs. Proof of
Notional value
concept.
means the face value
The
of
legal
underlying
structure
contracts,
works. In
not the actual
bankruptcy,
risk
secured
exposure,
creditors
which is smaller.
take the assets.
even if the real
Customers
exposure
with
is
security
1% of
entitlements
notional,
wait
that's
in
$6
line, and the
trillion
system moves on.
against capital reserves.
Now imagine
that
the
don't
same
come
scenario
close.
but scaled up. Not
Derivatives
one broker
or debts.
failing,
A credit
but a
default
systemic
swap,
collapse.
CDS,
Derivatives derivatives,
is a bet on
unwinding,
whether a bond will default.
the DTCC
An
insolvent.
interest rate swap
Banks
is a
use
bet on the
derivatives
direction of
to hedge
interest
risk, but they also
A
use them
currency
to
swap
speculate.
is a bet on exchange
And the
rates.
speculation far
And these
exceeds
bets
the
are layered
hedging.
on top
The
of each
problem
other,
is counterparty
interconnected,
risk. When
leveraged.
you enter a derivative
Banks use
contract,
derivatives to
you have a
hedge risk,
counterparty on the other
but they
side.
also use
If they
them to
can't pay,
speculate.
you
And the
lose.
speculation far exceeds
To
the
manage
hedging.
these derivatives are
The problem is
collateralized. You
counterparty
post
risk.
collateral. usually securities, to back the contract, and that collateral is held at a clearing.
To manage this, derivatives are collateral.
If your counterparty fails, the clearinghouse seizes the collateral and pays you.
The contract.
That's the theory. But here's the reality. The same collateral is used multiple times.
If your
Stock held by Cede Co might be collateral for 10 different derivative contracts. Each party thinks they have a claim to that stock. But there's only one stock. In normal times, this works because most derivatives don't default. Counterparties pay. Collateral sits unused. But in a crisis, when multiple counterparties fail at once, everyone claims the same collateral.
Because most derivatives don't default.
And there's not enough. This is what happened in 2008 with AIG sold credit default swaps, ensuring mortgage-backed securities. When the securities defaulted, AIG owed $180 billion to counterparties like Goldman Sachs. AIG didn't have it. The firm was insolvent. The government bailed them out with $180 billion, because if AIG failed, every counterparty would have claimed the collateral, and there wasn't enough. The entire system would have collapsed. But next time there might not be a bailout. The political will doesn't exist. The amounts are too large, and the legal framework says derivatives counterparties don't need a bailout. They have super priority. They can seize the collateral immediately, and that collateral is every stock, bond, and security held by Cede Co, your 401k, your brokerage account, your pension fund, all held in unsegregated pools, all available as collateral for derivatives. And when the crisis hits, the derivatives counterparties, the big banks, the protected class, will take it all. Legally. Now let me show you who designed this system and why. David Rogers Webb's research identifies the key players. The group of 30, is a private organization of central bankers, finance ministers, and financial market leaders. Members include past and present heads of the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, and major banks like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. In the 1990s, the G30 published reports advocating for securities law reform. They called for dematerialization, central depositories, and harmonization across jurisdictions, the same reforms that eliminated property rights and introduced security entitlements. Why? Control. A centralized system with all securities held at a central depository gives the central banks and major banks control over the entire financial system. In a crisis, they can freeze accounts, seize collateral, and ensure their own survival at the expense of everyone else. The UCC revisions were drafted by the American Law Institute and the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, but the working groups included representatives from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the DTCC, and major law firms representing banks. The drafts were not written by consumer advocates. They were written by the institutions that benefit, and those drafts were then adopted by state legislatures with minimal scrutiny, because the UCC is technical, complex, boring. Legislators don't read it. They rely on summaries from lobbyists, and the lobbyists work for banks. The same process happened globally. The UK revised its securities laws in the 1990s. The EU harmonized through directives. Japan adopted similar reforms, all coordinated, all moving in the same direction, eliminating ownership, introducing entitlements, securing the position of derivatives counterparties as the protected class. This wasn't an accident. It was intelligent design, executed over decades. With the end game in mind, the great Taken, Webb argues that the entire debt accumulation cycle, the explosion of derivatives, the systemic leverage, all of it was deliberate. Create massive debt, debt that can never be repaid. And when the system collapses, use the legal framework to take all the collateral, every stock, every bond, every property, financed with debt, swept back into the hands of the central banks and major financial institutions. A controlled demolition followed by a reset, and at the center of it all is the DTCC, Cede Co. the entity that owns everything. And when the DTCC goes insolvent, which it will when derivatives collapse, the secured creditors take possession of everything. Let me show you why SIPC insurance won't protect you. The Securities Investor Protection Corporation, SIPC, was created in 1972 to protect customers of failed broker-dealers. If your broker goes bankrupt, SIPC insurance covers up to $500,000 per account, including $250,000 in cash. Sounds good, but there are problems. First, SIPC insurance only covers broker fraud or failure to segregate customer assets. It does not cover market losses. If your stocks drop in value, SIPC doesn't pay. Second, SIPC has limited funds. The SIPC Reserve Fund has about $4 billion against trillions of dollars in customer accounts at brokers. If multiple major brokers fail simultaneously, the SIPC fund is wiped out instantly. Third, SIPC insurance doesn't apply if the DTCC itself fails. SIPC protects you from your broker's bankruptcy. But if the central depository, the entity that holds all securities, goes insolvent, SIPC is irrelevant. You have a security entitlement against a bankrupt entity, and you're an unsecured creditor. Fourth, the recovery process takes years. Lehman customers filed claims in 2008. Some didn't get paid until 2015 or later. During that time, your assets are frozen. You can't trade. You can't withdraw. You can't access your own money. And fifth, SIPC coverage is not guaranteed. It's administered by a private corporation. In a systemic crisis, SIPC could fail, or Congress could change the rules, or payments could be delayed indefinitely. The promise of $500,000 in coverage is only as good as the ability and willingness to pay. So the idea that SIPC protects you is a false comfort. It protects you from small failures, individual brokers going under. But in a systemic crisis, when derivatives collapse and the DTCC goes insolvent, SIPC is meaningless. You're holding a contractual claim against a bankrupt entity. Unsecured creditors take everything before you get anything. Let me show you what Webb says will happen. The next financial crisis, which Webb believes is inevitable given the debt levels and derivative exposure, will start with a trigger, a sovereign default, a major bank failure, a derivatives chain reaction. Whatever the trigger, the result is the same. Counterparty failures cascade. Margin calls can't be met. Derivatives unwind, and the collateral at the DTCC is claimed by everyone at once. At that point, the DTCC, which holds only $3.5 billion in capital against $600 trillion in derivative claims, will be insolvent immediately. And when the DTCC files for bankruptcy or goes into some form of emergency resolution, the bankruptcy code provisions kick in. Derivatives, counterparties, the protected class, have super priority. They seize the collateral under Section 555, 556, 559, and 561. They can do this immediately without judicial review. Without waiting, they take the securities held by Cede Co. and use them to settle their derivative contracts. This means your stocks are gone, your bonds are gone, everything held in a brokerage account, a 401,000 pension fund, all of it held at the DTCC through Cede Co. is collateral for derivatives, and the derivatives counterparties have legal right to seize it. You're left with an unsecured claim in the DTCC bankruptcy. You wait years. You might hit 10 cents on the dollar. Meanwhile, the banks that were counterparties on derivatives, maybe zero. Meanwhile, the banks that were counterparties on the derivatives, the ones that caused the crisis through reckless speculation, walk away whole. They got the collateral. Not theft. They're protected, and you're wiped out. This is what Webb calls the great taking, not theft, legal confiscation, under a framework built over 30 years specifically for this purpose. And it's not limited to securities. Property financed with debt, mortgages, car loans, business loans, all become collateral in this scenario. The banks foreclose. The assets are taken, and those who thought they owned property find out they were only borrowers, debt holders. When the debt can't be paid, the collateral is forfeited. Webb's analogy is a monopoly board. All the assets get swept back to the bank.
The debt supercycle.
The game resets, and the bank starts loaning again.
Ensure a collapse. Use the collapse
On their
to
terms,
confiscate all
this is
assets
the endgame of the
and
debt
rebuild the
supercycle.
system with the central banks
Create
and
unsustainable
major
debt,
financial institutions
ensure a
owning
collapse,
everything.
use the
Now, let me
collapse
show you
to
what you can do,
confiscate
because Webb's
all
message is
assets
not just
and
doom.
rebuild the
He
system with the
offers
central
solutions.
banks and major financial
First,
institutions
understand what
owning
you own
everything.
or
Now,
don't
let
own.
me show you what you can
If you
do,
hold stocks
because
in a
Webb's
brokerage
message
account,
is
you
not
don't own
just
them.
doom.
You have a security
He offers
entitlement.
solutions.
In a
First,
systemic crisis,
understand
you're
what
at
you
risk.
own
Second,
or don't
consider
own. If you hold
alternatives.
stocks in a brokerage
Physical
account,
assets.
you don't own them.
If you own gold,
You have a security
physical gold in your
entitlement.
possession,
In a
no
systemic
one can take
crisis,
it.
you're at
It's
risk.
not a security
Second,
entitlement.
consider
It's not held by
alternatives.
Cede Co. It's yours.
Physical assets.
Same with
If
physical
you own
real
gold,
estate that's fully
physical
paid
gold
off.
in your possession,
No
no
mortgage,
one can take
no
it.
lien, no debt.
It's not a
You own
security
it outright.
entitlement.
It's
It's
much
not
harder
held
to
by
confiscate.
Cede Co.
Third,
It's
diversify
yours. Same with
jurisdictions.
physical real estate
Don't
that's
keep
fully
all
paid
your
off.
assets in
No
one country,
mortgage,
one
no
system.
lien,
Spread
no
them
debt.
across multiple jurisdictions.
You own it outright.
If the US
It's much
system
harder to
collapses,
confiscate.
assets in other countries might be
Third,
protected.
diversify
Fourth,
jurisdictions.
reduce
Don't
debt.
keep all your
If
assets
you
in
own
one
nothing,
country,
you can't be
one
foreclosed
system.
on.
Spread them across
Debt is
multiple
the leverage they use
jurisdictions.
to take assets.
If the U.S.
If you
system
have no
collapses,
debt, you remove
assets
that
in other
leverage.
countries might be protected.
Spread awareness.
Fourth,
This system
reduce
works
debt.
because people
If you
don't
own
know about
nothing,
it.
you
If
can't be
millions of people
foreclosed on.
understand that
Debt
they
is the
don't own their
leverage they
stocks,
use to
that the
take
legal
assets.
framework allows
If you have no debt,
confiscation,
you
political
remove that
pressure
leverage.
might force changes.
Fifth,
Webb calls
spread
for legal
awareness.
reform.
This system works because
Repeal the
people
safe
don't
harbor
know about
provisions
it.
in
If
the
millions of
bankruptcy
people
code.
understand that they don't
Restore
own their
property rights
stocks,
in the UCC.
that the legal framework
Require
allows
true segregation of
confiscation,
customer assets.
political pressure
But
might
these
force
reforms
changes.
require political will.
Webb calls
And
for legal
political will
reforms.
requires awareness.
Repeal the safe harbor
If this stays
provisions
hidden,
in the bankruptcy
nothing
code.
changes. And the great
Restore
taking
property rights
happens as
in the
planned.
UCC.
Sixth, hold institutions
Require
accountable.
true segregation of
Even
customer
billionaires are at
assets.
risk under this system.
But these reforms
Billionaires
require
who hold
political
stocks through
will,
brokers
and
have
political will
security
requires
entitlements,
awareness.
not
If
ownership.
this stays hidden,
If the DTCC
nothing
fails,
changes, and the
they
great
lose too,
taking happens
and
as
billionaires
planned.
have political
Sixth,
power.
hold
If they
institutions
understand the risk,
accountable.
they
Even
can push for
billionaires are
change.
at risk under this
Webb
system.
believes this
Billionaires
is
who
the
hold
key.
stocks through
Make the
brokers have
powerful
security
understand that they're
entitlements,
vulnerable,
not
and
ownership.
they'll act.
If the
Let
DTCC
me end with
fails,
this.
Cede
You don't own your
Co,
stocks.
and
That's not
billionaires have
hyperbole.
political power.
That's legal
If they
fact.
understand the risk,
Under the
they
Uniform
can push for
Commercial Code,
change. Webb
adopted in
believes
all
this
50
is the
states
key.
and
Make the
harmonized
powerful
globally,
understand that
you
they're
have a security
vulnerable,
entitlement, a
and they'll
contractual
act.
claim, not ownership.
Let me end with this.
The actual
You don't
securities
own
are
your
owned
stocks.
by Cede Co.
That's not
nominee of the
hyperbole.
DTCC.
That's legal
in
fact.
bankruptcy,
Under the
you're an
Uniform
unsecured
Commercial
creditor.
Code, adopted in
Secured
all 50
creditors,
states
the
and
derivatives
harmonized globally,
counterparties, the protected class, come
you have a
first.
security
This
entitlement,
legal
a
structure
contractual
was put in
claim,
place deliberately
not
over
ownership.
30 years.
The actual securities are owned by Cede
Dematerialization,
Co, a
centralization,
nominee of the
UCC
DTCC.
revisions,
And in
harmonization,
bankruptcy,
safe harbor
you're an
provisions,
unsecured creditor.
central clearing,
Secured
all
creditors,
designed to create
the
legal
derivatives
certainty that in a
counterparties,
crisis,
the
banks
protected
can take the
class,
collateral.
come
Your
first.
stocks,
This
your
legal
bonds,
structure was
your
put in
securities.
place deliberately over
It
30
has already
years.
happened. Lehman Brothers,
Dematerialization,
2008.
centralization,
Customers waited years.
UCC
got
revisions,
MF
harmonization,
Global, 2011.
safe harbor provisions,
Segregated funds
central
gone,
clearing,
commingled,
all designed to
lost.
create legal
These were
certainty
test
that in a
runs.
crisis,
Proof the
the
system
banks
works.
can take the
The
collateral,
next
your
crisis
stocks,
will be systemic.
your bonds,
Derivatives
your
will
securities.
collapse. The DTCC
It has already
will
happened.
go insolvent.
Lehman Brothers,
And
those
the great
Milocho
taking will
customers
occur
waited years,
legally,
got
without
pennies.
judicial
MF
review,
Global,
immediately.
2011.
David Rogers Webb documented
Segregated
all of this in
funds
his book and
gone,
documentary, The
commingled,
Great Taking.
lost.
He's a former
These
hedge
were
fund
test
manager.
runs. Prove
He
the
knows
system works.
from the inside.
The next crisis
And
will be
he's warning you.
systemic.
The architecture
Derivatives
is in
will
place.
collapse.
The
The
plumbing is built. The
DTCC
legal
will go
certainty
insolvent.
exists.
And the great
All it
taking
needs
will
is
occur
the trigger. When will it
legally,
happen? No one knows.
without judicial
But the
review.
debt levels are unsustainable.
Immediately.
Derivatives exposure is $600
David Rogers.
trillion.
Webb documented
Central
all of
banks
this in his
can't
book
keep
and
the system
documentary,
afloat forever.
The Great
The
Taking.
collapse is
He's a
inevitable.
former hedge fund
And when
manager.
it comes, if you hold stocks
He
in a
knows
brokerage
the
account,
system from the
if you have
inside,
a
and he's warning
401k,
you.
if you have a pension
The
fund, you're
architecture
at risk
is in place.
because you
The
don't
plumbing
own
is
those
built.
assets.
The
You have a
legal
claim.
certainty
And in
exists.
bankruptcy,
All it
claims are
needs
worthless.
is the trigger.
If
When
this
will
opens
it
your eyes to
happen?
the great taking, if
No
you
one
understand
knows,
now that the
but the
legal
debt
framework
levels
allows
are
confiscation of all
unsustainable.
securities in a
Derivatives
crisis,
exposure is
if you
$600
realize
trillion. Central banks can't keep the system afloat forever. The collapse is inevitable. And when it comes, if you hold stocks in a brokerage account, if you have a 401k, if you have a pension fund, you're at risk.
No debt,
Because you don't own those assets, you have a claim.
and awareness. Because
And in
they built the
bankruptcy,
system, they
claims
wrote
are
the law.
worthless. If this opened
They
your
tasted
eyes to the great
precedents.
taking, If you understand now that the legal framework allows confiscation of all securities in a crisis, if you realize that